All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Welcome to Counseling Corner. My name is Brian Bader. I'm the coordinator of student organizations and wellness programs at ACC. And with me today is my co-host on our new ACC Wellness podcast called Mind Locked, Abby Rutland. How's it going, Abby?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing very well. What have you been up to lately?
You know, the usual. Homework, work, and more homework. All that fun stuff.
So we decided to start doing this wellness podcast basically because Abby is a genius and found me outside of our Littleton campus one day, and in conversation figuring out what can we do to, continue to do our due diligence in educating our students on, healthy habits and things like that. And Abby said a podcast is totally applicable to today's time. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your idea there, Abby?
Yeah, I mean, how did we even get to that conversation? We're talking about like Lego minifigures or something, and we're like, oh, let's do a podcast. A podcast, it's definitely a more popular thing in today's social media. I mean, there's so many different forms of media that you can listen to things on, like songs or like watch a YouTube video, or the newest thing on Instagram right now is Reels, little 30-second short clips, kind of like TikToks too. And so when we're thinking about how can we get, talking about mental health out there into the world that's accessible and easy and quick for people to listen to, we were thinking, okay, a podcast would be probably one of the better ideas because you don't have to necessarily sit down and watch a YouTube video that's going to take anywhere from, 30 seconds to 30 minutes. Or reading an article or reading a book, it's going to require you to actually sit down and focus on that one item. But with a podcast, you can listen to it on a run, listen to it while you're in the car or while you're doing dishes. We thought it'd be super accessible and super easy to listen to.
And so with that, as you can hear, Abby is a fabulous speaker and has great ideas. And what that kind of reminded me of is the old advice column in the newspaper that was Dear Abby. Now, this is not your grandma's Dear Abby, right? This Abby's a little bit more hip and up to date. But we're going to start a little segment called Dear Abby, where if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, or ideas, or just, conversation that you'd like to have or hear had on our show, there's a link that you can find on our website. So feel free to hop over there and throw in any input that you have and help us build some content to provide back to you. And in case you missed it yesterday on our second day of the 5 Days of Feels, we released our video called What's Really on Your Mind. And this was an art project hosted by Madison Marie. It's basically just putting your thoughts out there, right? So the idea is you start with this silhouette of a head, and inside that head or outside the head, or however you decide to build this project, you just put thoughts or imagery that relates to you. So she did a great little video and a blog. There's a template to help you out along the way as well. So feel free to check that out on our YouTube page and on our website. And
we also have national resources for help. Now, some of these are pretty popular. One of them is going to be obviously the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. There's a text or a number that you can also text as well in case you have any questions about feeling suicidal or any suicidal thoughts. Other good foundations are going to be the JED Foundation, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Love is Louder, is also a big one right now because their motto right now is love is louder than the distance between us, which I think is really applicable for COVID times with all of us being stretched so far apart. We also have some other guests with us today. So we also have Chris St. John. He is a licensed, I'm going to say it wrong, and I say it wrong every single time, Jungian psychotherapist. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do you say it?
Jungian.
Okay, I knew I was close. He is currently employed at ACC as a therapist, while running his own private practice. He's also worked in hospitals, clinics, for the counties, courts, nonprofit organizations. You can probably name it. He's probably had experience with it. So thank you for being on the show today. We also have our licensed clinical social worker practicing as a therapist at ACC, and this is going to be Lane Trujillo. Did I say that right? Trujillo. Okay. Sorry, me and names. I'm trying.
It's all right.
She's also a practicing therapist at ACC and has a private practice in the Littleton area as well. Her areas of expertise include psychological trauma, depression, anxiety, stress, college-specific adjustments, super important, life transitions, grief and loss, and then mind and body practices. So she's got a lot of different things that she's got a lot of expertise in. So definitely check her out if you have any questions on any of those areas. So thank you for coming to the show, Miss Lane Trujillo.
That's right. Yep.
Perfect. All right. And then last but not least, we have Jennifer Husum.
Pretty close. Husum.
Husum. Ah, all right. And she is ATC's Associate Dean of Equity and Compliance. So thank you for being on the show today as well.
You are welcome.
Perfect.
Jen's title is actually much longer than that, but I cut it off because I didn't know what your, where your breath patterns were yet, since we just.
Oh, thank you.
But so these are some great resources for those of you that are ACC students listening. Go to the DEDA Students Office, not necessarily on campus right now, but if you go onto the website at acc.dos@arapahoe.edu, you can get general resource information, some assistance in that way. You can also call them at 303-797-5730. Campus Police is also a great resource for you out there at 303-797-5600. And anyone in Colorado, obviously give a call to the Colorado Crisis Service Center. You can always text TALK to 38255 if you need any assistance there.
All right. So when we say the phrase mental health, and this is kind of, I guess a pretty vague question, just kind of open to the panel about what your input would be, but I think everyone has their own interpretation of what that means. I know for me, mental health is kind of like, well, you want your mind to be healthy. It's a very logical thought process, but I know there's a whole lot more that goes into that. When we say mental health as a generalization, what exactly does that mean? If you guys could give us, your little view on what is mental health.
So I think when we talk about mental health as a generalization, I think it's a pretty difficult concept to get your head around because it has so many different meanings, right? I think when we think about mental health and physical health, when we think about physical health, we think about it in more specific terms. So we might say, oh, I'm struggling with like diabetes, for instance. We don't say, I'm struggling with a physical illness because it's too vague, right? It's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could be anything, and I think when we talk about mental health, we make that mistake as far as, as far as saying I have a mental illness or somebody has a mental illness. It's like, what does that mean? It's just, it's too vague, right? And we don't really know how to respond to that. So it's important to say, to be more specific. And I think in our society, we shy away from that because we don't know enough about specifics, right? In general. I mean, you don't necessarily say I have depression, but you don't also say I have a mental illness either, because there's a lot of stigma involved in that, unfortunately. So I feel like, on two fronts, if you, start becoming more specific about what's going on, like, I do struggle with depression, right? Lots of people struggle with depression, but we don't, when we talk about it in that way, it's more normalized, right? It's like, oh yeah, I might struggle with those same things, right? Those same, I might not feel good about myself. I might not have energy, motivation, those kinds of things. So it really evokes a better understanding of what mental health is, what mental illness is, if we can just be more specific about it.
Right. I mean, I have quite a few friends who will say like, oh yeah, I have like mental health issue. I'm like, great. Like that could be anything and everything on the spectrum. I mean, you could be like nervous some days, or some of my friends are on heavy medication and they can't function and do their job without it. So I'm always kind of asking questions almost like cautiously because I don't want to offend them, but I also don't want to make it less than it is because I know they're struggling with something and I definitely want to help with whatever that is if I can.
Right. Yeah.
And I would also add too, to what Lane was saying is, I guess one way I've kind of looked at it over the years is something or anything that impedes or interrupts your day-to-day life. So if it's something that affects you negatively, that could be, and again, just like, you two were saying, it's a very generalized, term. So it really doesn't make it hard to kind of nail down. But I guess one way I've kind of taken that over the years is if it interrupts, like I said, any day-to-day activity or your life or your routine in some way, like if it inhibits you from doing it, or if you have to, or if it becomes, challenging, or just even just simply too much. So yeah, it really is kind of vague, but I guess that's kind of the loosest or broadest way I've kind of defined it over time.
I've got a fun way to kind of sum up mental health that I heard a trainer once say, so I can't take any credit for it. I'm a trained mental health first aid facilitator, and so this was during our training. One of the when I got trained, one of the facilitators said this. So mental health is a concern when it impacts our ability to live, laugh, learn, and love. And I love that phrase because I think it's a lot of things that people can grasp onto as we think about the mental health as the impact it has on our lives. So I think we can all grasp on and say, okay, like I can see that in other people, or I can see that in myself.
I like that example. I think a lot of people kind of just, bypass those like negative feelings, and they're like, oh, I'm just like having a bad day or whatever, which could very well be true. But I think a lot of people kind of, like you were saying, Jennifer, like, oh, this person struggles with that, but like I don't have that. It's like, yeah, I understand that too. Not for the purpose of self-diagnosing. And I know everyone, I think, tends to like to do that a little bit. Say, oh, I have this, mental illness, or oh, I struggle with this disorder. But to better understand the basic science of some of these mental illnesses that are more prevalent, like anxiety disorders or bipolar disorders, what would your guys' thoughts be on those more common disorders that students have, or anyone really?
I guess I'd have to say my thought on this, it can affect anyone. I don't believe there's anyone that's immune to it. Whether it's situational or hereditary or whatever it may be, it has the potential to affect anyone at any time in their life, regardless of where you come from, background, what your life has been like. It doesn't matter what it is. So it has potentiality.
I think anxiety is something that everybody can relate to. And I think that's what, and obviously the prevalence of it is higher probably than most. But I also think that, when people are trying to understand or just understand the concept of mental health, like, oh, I've been anxious before, but understanding the difference between being anxious and having a disorder, are two different things. And I think that is sometimes where the stigma comes in. About people are like, oh, why are you anxious about this situation? Well, like, get over yourself. Like, we've all probably heard that from somebody at some point. But when we have an anxiety disorder, there's much more significant impact on the person in those areas that they, things that they need to do in their lives. And so that's the big difference. And so while we can, people can get that foothold by saying, I understand what anxiety is, but they, it's almost like needing to understand it a little bit further and understand the daily, if not hourly impact that somebody who's been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder manages regularly. I think that's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. And I know, like, I can relate to some people who have a certain form of anxiety, because I mean, let's be honest, homework and tests will throw that anxiety on me all the time. But with like bipolar disorder, I didn't know a whole lot about that. I had to go and research and like, what is this? Well, how does this affect you? So I think with that, I can't necessarily relate to someone when they say, oh, I'm bipolar. Like, I have really close to no idea what that means. Can you explain that to me? Or how do you deal with that? So it's definitely a different disorder, for sure, for me in my thought process.
I think it's important that for people, it's that not to get too attached to the term or the definition. or even the diagnosis any more than you would, something physical. Whether it's, somebody has seizures or is diabetic or even cancer. These are for, for, medical purposes. So, sometimes when I speak with people, it's like, careful not to, get too attached to the term, because then it loses what it's actually doing to them. And then they, can tend to over-identify with it. You are not that. You may have the symptomology, you may have things that are associated with it, but you are much more than a diagnosis. And it does change things when it becomes something, psychological. And that's a whole other discussion, but just something for people to, kind of feel out. It's like, don't identify, with it. You may be able to relate to it, maybe associate to it, but don't become it, because there's a great deal more to you than a definition or even a diagnosis.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. And, I like to explain it too as we have the DSM-5. It's it's like, the medical version for psychology. And I'd like to tell people that it's just a guide, right? It's just a guide to help us figure out kind of what is happening with you. And I really like what Chris said about it being, you aren't that, it's a part of you perhaps, but it is not you. So we don't want to over-identify with whatever diagnosis we may have. It's like, sometimes I like to think of it as a tenant, in an apartment building. So you're the apartment building, and this is just a tenant in your apartment building. And sometimes it needs attention, sometimes it doesn't, right?
That's a great
I love that,
illustration of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to be
picturing it
stealing
right
that,
now.
Lane, just to let you know. So
Yeah.
You're welcome to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important when especially talking about different disorders and diagnoses, is that we don't want anyone to self-diagnose themselves. So we can all experience, when we look at the definition that's on the screen right now. So we can all say we've had anger, hope, anxiety, and happiness at different points of our lives. Does that necessarily mean that we're cycling between, having the symptoms associated with bipolar disorder? Not necessarily. So that's where really we want those clinicians to take an active role in helping us understand what's going on. And if the diagnosis is necessary, then that's part of it. And then they're in our apartment building. I love that.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely got that like apartment building like picture in my head right now, and I'm like, what would the tenant look like? Like, would he be blue because he's like sad? But that's besides the point.
I see a great activity in that. I see like, how many different tenants do we have in our building? And
Oh my
thinking about kind of the things we carry with us. So
Absolutely.
That'd be a fun conversation. I feel like it'd be very lengthy, at least for me.
Sounds like another podcast in the making.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a good idea. We should write that down. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. So I liked how you were touching on like different symptoms and whatnot. When we hear these words, symptoms, I know that a couple of ones that I've talked to friends or read on the internet or doing research are different ones like dissociation and psychosis. I think that's how you say that. For someone who isn't diagnosed with any mental illness, I'm left with my interpretation of what that experience is like. Are you guys able to give me a generic example of how these symptoms might feel for someone who is struggling with either dissociation or psychosis? And what does that look like? And how can I, as a bystander, better assess to provide with the individual with what they need? Because I know sometimes people are like, oh, well, I just need you to just be there for me, and in case I need you. And I'm like, great. Anything else? Because I feel like if someone's struggling with these things, there should be more that I should be able to do with them. But What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think, from, somebody who isn't a professional, if you see some behaviors, that a person is kind of checked out, or not sort of, in, reality, it's good to just, say, hey, I'm kind of worried about you. It seems like you're having trouble right now, just to check in. But it would be more important to say, do you have somebody, that you see, or that, do you want to go talk to somebody? Because there's different, dissociation and psychosis are kind of big topics. There's different kind of levels of that. But it's really more about, kind of the psychological first aid piece of it. If you feel like somebody's in distress, then you need to maybe take some additional steps to get them, more professional help, or get them into a place of safety. If somebody is totally checked out or disassociated, then, they're kind of in danger. They are in danger. And so you want to make sure that, you get them into a safe space.
You're saying that the first, or I guess the main symptom for dissociation is just really someone being checked out. Because when I'm looking for, I guess, warning signs or something that tells me, oh, this person's a little bit off. I mean, I know kids who will stare at a wall, who are bored out of their minds for like 5 minutes or something. I don't think that's necessarily dissociation. What would you say would more guide me along the lines of, oh, this person needs help?
So somebody who might have, might disassociate, they may be like driving. They may talk to you and say, I was driving and I all of a sudden ended up in Wyoming, right? And I didn't know how I got there. That would be like, okay, there's something else going on, kind of thing. That would not be your regular, zoning out while you're driving. So, we all kind of disassociate at some level, when we are on automatic pilot, when we're driving or whatever, that's a bit of, it's a little bit of dissociation going on there. But yes, when it becomes a problem, when, you do things like you can't remember where you've been, or, what you said, minus, not utilizing substances. But does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, so definitely out of the ordinary dissociation.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes I would, and totally agree with what Elaine was saying, but also if something just seems out of the norm, maybe don't perseverate over the symptomology. Just kind of be there for the person. If something doesn't feel right, usually intuitively we kind of know if something just doesn't feel right, because if we get lost with the symptoms and we're trying to check boxes in our head, then you're not present for the person right then and there. If something doesn't feel right, then you can, like was said earlier, see if they have something else in place for them, whether it's family or friends or yourself or a therapist or whatever it may be, because if it's severe enough and if you're not sure what to do and there's some sort of danger involved, this is why we have things like 911 and certain agencies and things like this to kind of help out. Again, that's if there's an emergency of some sort. But what I have found is just try to be with the person. Just try to be with them. And if they're just looking to connect or talk, or they say, hey, something's not right. So you don't have to worry about, wait, okay, in that podcast, they said, this and this and this. It's like, trust your gut, trust yourself. If you're there with the person, you'll kind of have an idea if something doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that is so important. That's just kind of fundamental, is just to be present with the person. Absolutely. Just to know they know that they're being supported in that moment.
This is where I love mental health first aid. If anyone's done it, I've been through that training. It's an 8-hour training. It's a really great training, and I love that I'm able to facilitate it, although not in COVID, because it's in person. But there's a couple of good principles that come from this that totally come to mind. And what we're talking about is so they like to define the difference between like symptoms and signs. So signs are what you externally see. So that's when we see stuff happening with somebody, we're all noticing those behaviors, right? Whatever they might be. And we all have a common kind of understanding of where people are at, or what is like normal accepted behavior. So, and that's not to say that we're all the same and that we all act the same way, but that there is some common ways of like handling situations or how people react to things in general. When things are off from that norm, of course, those are signs. That may be indications of symptoms that are going on, but not always necessarily. But it always means that we may need to do something or say something. And then, thinking about kind of like how we kind of go through that, and how we help that person. The first thing with mental health first aid that they teach you is to listen non-judgmentally and really just be there for that person. That really echoes what Lane and Chris are saying, is that we need that, just to be there for that person and see what they need, what's going on with them, ask them questions and see how you may be able to need to get to them to help, or to be able to assess that fact that maybe there is a larger risk going on and you do need to get somebody to intervene to assist you that is medically trained to be able to handle the situation. But if we start from that place of caring, everything else, we can work through the rest of the things. But it's like, I'm noticing things and I need to say something. And unfortunately, we live in a society where we don't confront each other as much as we should, when we're concerned, and that we sometimes, we live in a world of text messaging and not as much dialogue or social media posts. But this is where a good conversation is really helpful. Sorry, that took it a little bit of a different direction, but
No, perfectly.
Perfect. Yeah, that's awesome, Jennifer.
It definitely helps. I've never even heard of mental health first aid, so I'm definitely curious to check that out later.
it's awesome. Before we go on to another topic, I just wanted, because Brian, can you go back to that slide that had like the prevalence of different statistics? It's like, yeah, up there. So we've got schizophrenia up here, and you can see the prevalence is quite low. And I just want to point that out, because I think when we think about persons who have schizophrenia, it's obviously its prevalence is quite low, but then it is also something that we see highlighted so significantly in media as such a negative. And there is data out there, and this is covered in mental health first aid too, but that persons with mental health diagnoses, in specific schizophrenia, are more likely to be victims of crimes than to actually perpetrate crimes. And I think sometimes the media narrative can really change that. And so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because I think that's just important to kind of know how important it is not to think about diagnosis, but to really focus on behaviors and how we can help.
I definitely agree with you on that. The media definitely shows a different side of at least schizophrenia, for sure. Brian, did you want to talk a little bit on this music festival?
Yeah, I just want to, give us a little brain check here. We've been talking about some heavy stuff, so lighten it up for a hot second. And, I never know how to say this word, but it always makes me feel like my Boston accent starts to come out. And I'm not from Boston. I lived there for a little bit, but like, is it NAMI? Is it NAMI? I feel like I'm like the Rear Admiral from Barstool up here. Like, hey, what's going on, guys? Get on NAMI.org here. You can learn about your mental health. But, they've got some good stuff on their website right now for Mental Illness Awareness Week going on through the 10th. So if you head over there to nami.org/MIAW, you can find some good activities and different sessions there to get some more education. But there's also an event going on. It's tomorrow at 5 p.m. And that's Pacific time. If you hop on the internet and you get on the YouTube channel for streaming on, Relax? Basically, this is an online mental health music festival, right? So Sound Mind is called Come Together. If you go to cometogetherfest.org, you'll find out some more information. They'll have artists such as Smith & Myers, Jason Isbell, Kiara, American authors Jade Bird, Yola, Shamir, and Sun Little. I'm only familiar with a couple of them. I've figured I'd go check them out after this and see what we've got going on. But there's also speakers from Mental Health America, the National Alliance on Mental Health Illness in New York City, and Music Cares. This will all be hosted by Jordan Carlos. So if you got some free time tomorrow, feel free to check that out. But there's a plethora of other activities going on as well. So don't be afraid to see what else you can get yourself involved in. But with 70% of musicians being, diagnosed with mental health disorders in some capacity, right? This is something that I found through that website of the music festival. It kind of brings to light that our diverse populations, whether it's, who you identify as an employer, like what you do for your profession, what your habits are in your spare time, or what your identity is and how much that can impact your mental health as a person, right? So we just wanted to talk a little bit about how much this can impact diverse populations beyond, just the things we do, right? So
I'm gonna hit you with some stats. So like Brian was talking about, although the rates of depression are lower in African American, and that stat's going to be 24.6%, and Hispanics and Latinx at 19.6%, then in whites at 34.7%. Sorry to hit you with all those numbers. I know I get lost too. The depression in American Africans and Hispanics are likely to be more persistent. So to our panel, mental health affects us all, but it hits diverse populations at times harder and in different ways. Can you guys talk about some of the disparities or the help-seeking care habits, as well as the barriers to set up care?
That's a big topic.
Absolutely.
Well, there's the basic, systemic problems that people who are minorities and identify, their genders, their identities are not binary, I guess. That systemic barrier, there's also that stigma that makes it more difficult for them to seek mental health assistance. There's also cultural, they're not barriers, it's just their cultures can, they have a different way of viewing mental health and also with treating it. So I like to think about Asian Americans or just Asian folks who would much rather treat any kind of mental health issue within their family. They don't even necessarily call it a mental health issue. So that can be a thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Cultures deal with their mental health issues in different ways, so that they don't necessarily seek out mental health care in a traditional way. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to talk on the fly, so sometimes I'm not as articulate as I would like to be.
You and me both. You're totally fine.
And I think too, there's a comfort level as well. I've had people over the years, like they'll contact me for therapy, and I had one person contact me and said, "Are you a Baptist?" And then I said, that I wasn't. She's like, "Well, I'd be more comfortable speaking with somebody who had a Baptist faith." I've had other people who would say, "I want to, speak with somebody of my same gender or racial background, religion, whatever." And if the dominating, race in America, if it's primarily a Caucasian dominated field, it would make sense to me, because I've seen this before, to where it's like, well, I don't know if you could fully understand what it is that I'm experiencing if I'm of a minority population or non-white. And it's like, that would make total sense. And because there's not maybe as many, African American or Asian American or, Indian American, it's like some people are going to gravitate towards somebody they're going to be more comfortable with, somebody that could have that intuitive nature and understand immediately. It's like, well, you already kind of know because we already have that shared commonality. And again, it's the same thing with gender too. You know, if somebody, you know, was gay as well, it's like, geez, I want a therapist who really understands what it's like to be a gay person in America. And if you're straight and they don't quite, you know, immediately understand that, they're like, well, you know, it would be, you know, too much time to explain and barriers and this and that. I think it's intrinsically human of us to be drawn towards what we relate to, what we're familiar with. And so it would make total sense why, you know, some numbers are going to be lower for other populations if they're going to come in and see a therapist, you know, who's white. It's like, well, you know, or they've migrated, you know, here to the US. So there's cultural considerations. There's so many factors involved. And I know it's being discussed in some circles, not enough. And I'm not going to speak for Lane, but you know, I guarantee this is something that she's come across as well. So it's discussions like this, it's topics like this that come up, and it's like, it makes total sense. But if you do reach out and say, okay, Chris, I don't think, you know, I want to see you, but could you refer me, or are there other resources? It's like, yes, because I have done that for people. Even if they don't want to see myself, I will help them to try and find somebody that they would be comfortable with.
Absolutely. And I think too, you know, even in meeting with a therapist who is, you know, if you're a minority and they're, say, Caucasian, you know, you as the helping professional, you know, need to be aware of barriers that might be in, you know, when you're talking to somebody. It's like, okay, you got to put it out on the table. And I think that's like one of your slides here coming up, you know, it's kind of, it can be like the white elephant in the room, right? And it's like, okay, please help me understand, you know, what you're struggling with. I'm not, you know, from your group. I'm, you know, I only have the information I have. I need you to help me, you know, help you to feel more comfortable.
One thing that I've said over the years to people, it's like, I have a degree in papers that say that I'm an expert in my field, but I'm not an expert at you. I need to know absolutely everything that I possibly can. And it's not just, you know, race or gender. It could be age. It could be, take your pick. And it's like, I'm not, you know, well-versed in everything.
Exactly.
But working with that individual, that is where that connection, if that trust is there, to build upon that trust. I get it's scary. You know, I'm in therapy myself. I've done my own work, and I've tried to break down, you know, certain barriers as well. It's not easy. It is scary, but once you do have that connection with someone, boy, that can just do so much for a person.
Mm-hmm.
I would also add just the intersection of those identities that we all hold can play a factor in how we bring ourselves to that discussion. So I think I loved Chris's point that, you know, I may be an expert in this area, but I'm not an expert in you. Like that's absolutely so true. And that the level of trust that needs to be built in that type of relationship is key. And so we have to start there. I mean, the concept of the systemic barriers that exist are, you know, it's not just limited in this area of mental health. Like when we think about, especially, you know, us all being associated with ACC, you know, we think about where this exists, prevalently in education. And we think about, you know, why is there such a gap in our minoritized populations, you know, being, you know, those clinicians that can provide that service, and why is that limited? Well, how can we change the education system to make those changes so that those barriers don't exist there, so that things can continue? And so we can go through that cycle of figuring out and continuing to look at this. But if equity is not a part of the conversation, you know, in any of these areas, it should be. And this is a true barrier to mental health support in our society.
I would definitely say that one of the barriers, I think, along like me and my peers, is like Chris was saying, like, yeah, it is scary. Like, you don't want to lay your whole life out on the table and have someone like, oh, well, I'm going to pick this at you and pick this at you. Like, therapists aren't there to judge you. They're there to help you. So yeah, it's a little bit scary, but if you put in the hard work, you'll learn some really incredible things about yourself. I would know. I've been through therapy as well. Alrighty.
All that fear goes back to the stigma, right? The fear
Mhm.
of being different, or not fitting in, or when you guys were talking about having a situation where your counselor may not see yourself represented by your counselor. Like, I can see another level of fear coming into play there, because you don't want to show any weakness, right? And for myself, that as an athlete, that was where my burying of feelings and things kind of came from. And it's like, you don't show weakness. This is the way you're kind of taught. Like, you move on from pain. You don't lay on the ice and play hurt. You get up and you don't play the victim to anybody. You have to find a way to move through that, right? And some of that maybe is now considered, I guess, toxic masculinity. I don't know entirely that it's old news, right? Because I still use it to some capacity and it works for me. Not saying that I'm perfect or my life is gravy by any means, but I'm happy that I don't find myself I'm not picking myself off the floor every day, right? And part of my brain says, well, I was kind of conditioned this way, right? I had to practice it, just like I go to the gym. If I want to get muscles, I have to go and I have to lift weights. And if I want to take care of my brain, like, I have to physically, actively exercise my mental health the same way, right? So I know Chris and I, we kind of touched on how, we may have some of that influence of, you just move on and deal with it. I just wanted to get your opinion on, am I completely off base in saying that I might think that for myself that some of that still works? Or is there some research that I should be looking into that I've missed that's telling me I'm completely in the weeds?
No, I think there is something to it, but everybody, again, this is going back to everybody being different. And what is that level of, kind of picking themselves back up? I think the biggest thing is how you do it. I'm former military and I work with a lot of vets as well. And a lot of us, we're definitely taught, it's like, hey, suck it up, move on. If there's no blood, there's no pain. And, that is maybe fine to get you through like a game or the military or things like that, but that is not sustainable. It's like, that's what makes this so delicate and so intricate, is to understand, all right, where do I stop the powering through and that sense of being able to suck it up to, what, I'm going to need some tools or some help as to how to do it, because it does not last. Trust me, at 48 years old, I've seen it too many times, and not just professionally, but personally. It's like, and I think it's really important to understand, it's like, where do I need to ask for help? And it's you're right, there's a lot of stigmas around that. I think it's I could even dare say it's kind of a Western ideology as well. It's like, you have to power through, you have to, it's all about being tough and whatever. And it's like, there are times for that, but daily, I was like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And because I would hate to see somebody struggle unnecessarily. Life's hard enough. I was like, I wouldn't want to make it any more difficult than it need be. Don't feed the beast, in a sense. So, and where that limit is, again, everybody's a little different, but it's the good, there was the film Batman Begins with Christian Bale. There's a line in it where Bruce, as a child, falls through, and his father's talking to him, and he says, Bruce, why do we fall? He says, to learn how to pick ourselves back up. We need to know, it's like, when we do fall, it's like, okay, but at times we're going to need somebody there. It's like, to learn, this is how we pick ourselves back up. This is how we're going to do it. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes you can do it on your own. The goal of therapy is to do it to where the client doesn't need us anymore. You don't want that dependency. And it's like, you're going to be able to do this on your own. You're going to be able to trust yourself and work with yourself in that.
I think the huge benefit in that is the ability to realize that you're probably not the only one that is dealing with that same issue, right?
Guaranteed. Yeah.
You realize that it's very prevalent across the board. And in case you haven't noticed it online, right now we have our project, which is the Elephant in the Room. And if you go onto our website, you'll see that there's a link where you can add in your stigma. So all you're asked to do is put in the thing that is bothering you, or the thing that you're worried about, or the thing that, you know, sticks in the back of your brain. Is it that you're afraid to ask for help? Is it that you have too much homework going on? Is it that your identity doesn't fit well in your family dynamic, or whatever it may be, right? It's completely anonymous. And what we're doing is we're collecting these, and then we are going to publish them as an album with a blog post either at the end of this week, probably more likely next week, just because of the tech that it requires to get it all uploaded. But then we're going to put that out there anonymously so that people can see that we're generally not just dealing with things by ourselves, right? It's definitely a team effort. And that although you may feel like you're on an island, there's probably a couple other people there hiding in the bushes with you, right? So if you haven't checked that out, please head over and give that a look-see.
Awesome. What are some, or I guess, yeah, what are some ways that I can better support someone who manages those feelings that we were just talking about in their lives? I know we touched a little bit on just being there for the person, for their support. Giving them your support. Are there any other ways that we can support people?
I would say that the biggest thing is listening. I think listening is woefully undervalued in society today. And I get how people want to help. They want to offer an opinion and all that, and that's fine, and I get it. But one thing that I've learned over the years, and especially with things that have gone on over the past summer with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything else, is I have this rule for myself of listening. And the first one is, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? And does this need to be said by me now? Listening can really do a lot, because when a person is heard, then I've seen that do more than anything else. It's not so much about fixing it, it's just about listening. And I'm not even talking about that as a therapist. I do that with friends and family too. It's like, do I really need to put in my 2 cents right now? And so I consider those things. And so that rule, those 3 rules, if I can answer those 3 honestly, then I may interject. But the rest of the time, I'm just trying to listen, because I'm going to learn a lot more by listening than by talking. So that's an approach that I've had for a while.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. You know, that's just really an undervalued skill, if that's what you want to call it, you know, of people listening to each other and actively listening, not just like, oh yeah,
Yes.
You know, really actively listening to somebody and looking in their eyes and just saying, I'm here, I hear you. And if there is, you know, any indication of, you know, that they might harm themselves, like your PowerPoint here says, be direct, you know, say, are you thinking about killing yourself? You know, because they'll tell you they're in pain. So you want to be direct, you know, and you want to be direct in a caring way. You know, I care about you. I want you to be around. So that piece is very important too.
I think that can, you know, opens up a whole nother conversation. You know, before we were talking about how, you know, every person experiences this different, right? And you're not an expert in you. You know, I have some friends that struggle with some of these things, but they don't want the sympathy, right? So if you try to empathize with them, or, you know, show any type of maybe emotional care, that it's a turnoff, right? And it kind of puts them in their shell in the corner a little bit. They're more the kind that want to attack it head on, whether it's with humor or, you know, like things that may kind of turn other people away a little bit. And I think, you know, having that ability to listen, right? My dad always told me growing up, God gave you 2 ears and, you know, 1 mouth for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk, right? So I don't know how well I have embodied that, but you know, it's one of those things that I constantly think about, because, you know, it's almost like telling a mama joke, right? Half the planet loves mama jokes, the other half does not want to deal with them at all. But usually you don't know which side of the fence that person's on until you've already told the joke, right? Now you're backpedaling. And so, Chris, your 3 questions there, like that really settled with me very well. And Lane, when you were talking about like the skill of listening, it's absolutely a skill, right? Because that's a perfect example for me. I got so distracted on those 3 questions, like I went off in my own little world for a minute, right? I was trying to practice active listening, but I kind of got caught up. So that's absolutely a skill. I'm working on it, and I just
We all are.
We all are, for sure. And, it's important to, just in connection to what Chris was saying, is just meet that person where they're at. And what you were saying too, Brian, some people hear things in different ways, right? It's like your friends that say, you show them some sympathy or whatever, and they're like, oh no, I'm not like, I don't need any of that. I'm a tough guy. I can, pull myself up by my bootstraps. It's about meeting that person where they're at, right? If they can't hear it in that way, humor, something different, right?
Yeah, meet up. Perfect. Yeah, both of you guys anyway said that, because you meet them where they're at, not where you want them to be. Because if that becomes an agenda and a goal, then it's like it's going to miss every time. So just meet them where they're at, and then you're doing the best you can, just like they are.
I'd say my probably first thought is when I see someone like struggling with something, I'm like, ooh, how can I fix them? Or like, how can I help them? And like you were saying, like, that's not that's not the best thing to do, is just to listen. Because I know when I'm having a problem, I go to someone, I don't want their first thought or thing to say to me be like, oh, I can fix that for you. I'm like, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. I agree. Listening is a very, very good thing.
Yeah, my problem tends to be, I look at people and I assess it and say, here's what I think you need, right? Which a lot of the times what I think you need is not what you think you need, right? And that's very off-putting. I know it happens to me, but I haven't figured out how to, completely curb my, now it's coming from a good place, right? Most of the time, I don't think people are trying to do that to harm each other, but like you have your own world and you construct these ideas of how it operates. And a lot of the times nobody else is operating in that same space, right? Like we have our own VR headsets on, but we're playing different video games at the same time. So that's just.
And that's super important too. Your intent, you're intending to help somebody. You're not intending to hurt them, so sometimes that gets overlooked too, when we're, having conversation with somebody. What is the intent? Sometimes that intent gets lost in the conversation. And sometimes that needs to be, restated. Sometimes it's like, I care about you, or, whatever way they can hear it. Because, friends want to do right by friends. They're reaching out not to be judgmental. That I think we get in that space where, oh, people are going to judge me and I'm not, they're not going to hear me. And, it's really, your friends want to help you. So there's a trust there. There's a, I trust my friend. I know their intentions are good.
Jennifer, did you want to add anything onto that?
No, I feel like they covered it well.
No, I agree.
I love listening to them.
Awesome. Alrighty. So because ACC is a community that cares for each other, as we know from this panel, knowing how to help a friend is extremely important. Is it really as simple as it sounds? And I think we really touched base on that. Asking direct questions, staying by their side, listening, really simple things that aren't going to be that complicated. I know there's kind of a little bit of a stigma between peers and people I know. It's like, oh, well, I'm not qualified to like reach out to that person. Like, you don't have to be like qualified, just to be there, be by their side, listening to what their problem is. And if they're, I think, and you guys can correct me on this or agree, if their problem is something bigger than what, if they're telling you like, yeah, I am thinking about suicide, then definitely reach out to professionals and talk to mentors and peers and help them get the help, but definitely listening. So let's talk about some ways to practice self-care and how this affects our mental health. What are your guys' thoughts on practicing self-care, doing ways to, stay calm or stay relaxed? Any tips on how these things would help with mental health, or your own tips even?
I would say that everybody needs it at least at some point. Again, it's one of those things. I don't know anyone who hasn't used it. They're teaching it more in the military now, and for good reason. I think it's important, especially for college students. These are some very difficult times. It's like I think everybody could benefit from self-care, whatever it looks like. Anything that kind of helps you along, however it may look. From journaling to breathing to meditation to exercise to eating right, whatever it may look like. You can play with it. There's no wrong way to do it as long as it's actually benefiting you. So I think self-care is absolutely imperative, especially, if you're a healthcare provider of some sort. We have to do our own form, because if you're not taking care of yourself, I promise you, and I don't say that very often, you're not going to be able to take care of other people. Because I will see people say, well, the way I practice self-care is I care for others. I'm like, okay, but again, that's one of those things. It's not going to last. You're not going to be able to go the distance with it, and you're not going to be able to perform that optimum amount of care for another. So the better you're taking care of yourself, the more you're going to be able to do for friends, family, school, whatever it may be. And everyone does some form of it. So I think it's just, it's important. It's absolutely imperative, and something that we all need, at one time or another. And
What do you do?
Also, and I'll just say also, I'll tell you in a second. And I would also add to that, it's like the worst time to figure out how to practice self-care is when you need it. This is something, if you think you're in a good place, start doing it now. Start thinking and planning and practicing what it looks like, because when you're in a crisis, you're not going to anything intuitively as to, okay, I know this is where I'm supposed to breathe. It's like, it's too late. You're going to be in a lot of trouble. So work on it now. If things are okay, great. You're that much more ahead of the curve. And
So what's your skill?
I'd have to say that I like breathing. I have a mantra as well that I use. Exercise has been, really important for me. So things like that, I go into it very purposefully. So, and I go into it, I was like, this is what I'm doing it for. This is why I'm doing it. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this to help me. And it's very purposeful throughout it. So whether it's breathing or the mantras or exercise, where maybe I've got a few of them. Those are what I found that worked for me over the years. But I've also had to play with several as well. Some I tossed, some I kept. This should not be difficult. This should not feel like homework. This should actually be some fun with this as well. So if this is stressing you out, so some people will look for something for self-care and they're getting all anxious about it, stop. Do it at another time, because this should not be added to homework. This should not be, stressful. This is all about self-care.
Yeah, I like to use hockey as mine, right? That's my little crutch, because my biggest stressor is overthinking, right? And living alone, that's plenty of time to just have conversations with yourself. And I'm going to tell you, I'm a great conversationalist in my own head. There's never a dull moment. I never misspell a word, nothing, right? But for me, like being on the ice and playing hockey or, doing something of that capacity allows me to shut my brain off, right? So everything that I do is a reaction. It's not, it's not planned. It's not thought out. It's not second guessed. I just do it and move on. And for me, that's the best medicine that I can get.
I agree. I like to do the breathing. I don't do enough of it for sure. But when I do it, I sure notice a difference. I like to do the guided meditation, not meditation because I don't have a long attention span. So if somebody is talking to me, I do a lot better. And just relaxation stuff in general, even, mindfulness stuff that just clears my head out, going for a walk and just experiencing my environment. That really helps me to just stay centered, stay present, not worry about what's going to happen, because I can't control any of that, right? All I can control is right now, so I find that's very helpful as well.
All right, so some tips for being active. Because of COVID, I'd say the most popular one currently is being outside. Go for a walk or for a run outside. Take your dog with you. Take your family. Take your parents. Take everyone. My family loves to do big family walks after dinner every night. Plenty of exercise. You can practice yoga. Yoga is very fun. If you're not very stretchy, it's okay. Do it anyway. You'll stretch eventually. You can play a video game like Wii Fit or Dance Dance. Is that supposed to be Just Dance? I've never heard of Just Dance Dance.
No, like just dancing by yourself. Like you don't need a video game to dance. Like
No, it's underneath the video game. It says
It's on the
Dance Dance
slide.
Revolution.
yeah, it just says dance.
It
Yeah,
says
video.
Dance Dance Revolution.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at
That
the
is a
next
that is a game from back in the day. I will tell you that.
Oh, okay.
So there's like
I've never heard of that.
there's a pad with like 5 different icons, and on the screen they're all different areas.
Oh.
You got to dance
Like
on
in an
them.
arcade. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
but you can get it at your house on like Twister, right? It's like a
Oh.
Twister board that plugs into your PlayStation.
All right. You can do that if you have it too. Or just dance, like Ryan was saying. Get your friends over and have a dance party.
I was about to say, I was like, y'all don't dance anymore just without like normal music? And
No, yes, but So do you dance, Brian?
I do dance. I took ballroom dancing.
Oh.
So I worked at a boarding school, and this is actually like, this was my introduction to mental health, because a lot of our students, and actually one of them will end up being a host or a guest on one of our shows coming up. But he, well, not just him, but a lot of our students were dealing with different things, and able to kind of give a boarding school vibe a little bit more incentive for prom. They brought in these ballroom dancers. Now, keep in mind, I was probably like 23, 24 at this time. So not so old, but not so young either. But young enough to realize that that's not the kind of dancing that happens at a prom, right? So these ballroom dancing lessons ended up being faculty and staff predominantly, right? There were 2 students that showed up, and it ended up being weird because they made us all switch partners, right? So like somebody was dancing with his girlfriend and he's like eyeing him across the room, right? It's this awkward dynamic, but we got to learn all kinds of stuff because the students felt like twerking and doing their thing was way more fun, that they didn't feel like showing up on Wednesday nights. So I absolutely dance. Do you dance?
No. Other than like Just Dance on the Wii.
Everybody dances in some fashion. We've all got our moves, right? Even if they're
I got like dad moves.
Yeah.
What's a dad move? Like the sprinkler?
Yeah, like really old, like really slow stuff because you don't know what to do.
You know, I always wanted to learn the Bill Cosby dance from the Bill Cosby Show, how he just did that little shuffle at the beginning. But I could never, I looked so bad doing it.
Hey, if you can do ballroom dancing, you can probably do that just fine.
I don't know. It's a little different vibe, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have a dance off someday, do a little promo. So what do the rest of you guys do for your physical, staying active?
I actually, besides the gym right now, but I would actually I do martial arts. So I actually like, fighting and sparring and stuff like that with Krav Maga, or we do Aikido. So for me, I really like to, get out of my head, get really physical. So that's something that I've really enjoyed over the years.
Have you been watching the Cobra Kai?
No, I've heard it's really good though.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Definitely made me giggle because there's definitely some flashbacks to like the way, the way things were ran when I was a kid, and I'm sure you'll have those memories too. But the part that I love the best, and I think it's really true to just our world right now, is I couldn't figure out who was the good guy and who was the bad guy for the first 4 episodes or so. So it's pretty cool that, nobody is inherently one thing or the other. Like we've got a little bit of duality in us. So highly recommend it.
Okay. All right.
You definitely have that like karate vibe.
Practice those moves. That's great. That's great fitness. Watch the show and then practice all of them. Everybody's got to get their crane kick on,
That's how he
right?
dances. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a new special kick that he pulls out. So when you get there, we'll have to have a debrief, see if we can get you on Instagram Live doing it or something.
Oh, yikes.
I'd follow that.
Absolutely.
Obviously, mental health isn't something that just one person has to deal with. It takes all of us, and we can support each other in that process. So there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of get outside that bubble, even though we have COVID happening right now, right? Share your talents with others, whether it's, starting your own podcast and putting it out there for people to see and learn and goof off with. Raising money and doing community service work for others. Right now, there's a lot of people out there that could use support in different capacities. I know it seems like a weird time to maybe expose yourself. So obviously do what makes you comfortable. I had one of those duality moments the other day. I was at Dunkin' Donuts and there was this elderly woman who was getting ready to leave. And, she was pretty old to the point where moving was a challenge for her. They didn't have any more of those cardboard coffee sleeves, right? And she's got her plastic gloves on and everything, but that coffee is really hot. And I just expected to open the door for her on her way out. And she needed more than that from me, right? And she needed me to hold her coffee or get her something so she didn't burn herself. And the part that hurt me was that my first reaction wasn't to take the coffee out of her hand. It was to wonder, am I putting her at risk by supporting her or helping her in this way, right? So I don't know if that's a feather or not, but that was something that I thought about recently, just looking at this. So obviously do what makes you safe, but I don't want to see the world just shy away from helping each other because we're putting ourselves first. So remember that the village is important. Get creative, help your local communities. There's a lot of different ways to get out there. And as far as ACC goes, we have student organizations that are happening right now. They're all virtual at this point, but if you get onto our on our website at arapahoe.edu/student life, you'll find our clubs and activities. So please get involved. You're not alone, and we're here to support you. What have you guys been doing to maintain social activity during COVID or limited modalities?
You got to keep those connections. It's so important. And so I think everybody started with what can we do over Zoom, Skype, Facebook, FaceTime, you name it, like we're doing a lot there. But I think it's, you got to still get out of your home, get out and walk around and do those things, make connections where you feel comfortable. Some people, and be open as to where you're at with how you feel about everything right now, and where you need space or, where you do need connection. So, because everybody's at a different spot, not everybody's in that same spot where they feel comfortable being social in person. So you got to figure that out, and you've got to ask that directly. That's what I've learned a lot in this time.
Yes, I agree. You need to get out of your house for sure. Just like seeing other people can be really uplifting. And, if you have like a pod, like your family members or, a couple of close friends, just people that you feel safe with, try to establish, those connections too. And I like that you said, be open about where you're at, with safety. And be respectful to others too, who, are, feeling challenged by the situation too, because we don't know what's going on with other people.
Ditch the negative self-talk. So a lot of negative self-talk that's happening on social media right now is mainly focusing on Black Lives Matter. I think negative talk in general is not good. We can see how detrimental it can be, even if you're just telling yourself that. You're like, oh, I'm a failure today, or, oh, I'm super bad at this. Whether or not you were super bad at what you just did or whatnot doesn't matter, because you have to leave positive messages for yourself. And one example I think it gives is leave positive message on your mirror. So like some people write it like lipstick, or like there's some kind of expo marker. You can like write a positive message just to help yourself be uplifted throughout the day. Be gentle with yourself, especially for everyone, especially those with histories of eating disorders or changes in routine around food. Exercise can be scary and challenging, and it's okay not to be perfect. Believe me, I've been there. I've had a gym membership for like the past 2 years, and I still only know like 4 of the weights, and I still do them wrong every time, but I still go out there and I try to do it. Reach out. This one I think seems to be super difficult in the time when you need help, but it's just like a text message or a call, or just DM someone on Instagram, one of your friends, be like, hey, I'm really struggling with this right now. Can we talk, or can you listen? And I promise you 9 times out of 10, that person will be like, absolutely, I'm right here with you. I had a friend, I reached out to him at like 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this. And he was like, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Like on the side of the road, I was sitting in my car, like having like an emotional moment. And he's like, I'm there, let's go. So your friends are definitely out there to help you. Any other tips you guys want to give on developing a healthy, positive body image?
Such a big topic to think about, but I think we've hit the big ones in thinking about this. And this is something that takes work and time. And so I think we have to give ourselves that, to take like the idea of being gentle with ourselves. Time is really important, and dedicating, like if you're saying this is something I need to work on, then giving yourself the time and space to do that, and recognizing we're going to fail along the way. I think about people, especially thinking about like body image, people trying to lose weight and stuff like that. It's not a straight line down when people lose weight. It bounces all over the place, and how things work. So we have to give ourselves that time to get through that. There's no quick fixes. There really is just, we have to put in the work.
Alrighty. Anything else?
No. So with no final thoughts, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you do need to get help on campus, please check out our Dean of Students office on the website. You can also give them a phone call at 303-797-5730. Colorado Crisis Services is out there as well. And please don't forget Campus Police. For Jennifer, Christopher, and Lane, I've really had a great time. Thank you for joining us today. Abby, as always. But I think our listeners will get a lot of great information, great tips. They'll probably giggle a little bit too. But I can't thank you guys enough for coming on here and doing this with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
All right. Well, be sure to check us out coming up on future episodes. We'll probably be on YouTube for the hot minute, but we're working our way into the App Store. So, like I said, check us out. Peace.
Unlocked is coming soon.